ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the study of Great Master Sri Ramakrishna. Today we are going to start a new chapter, Sri Ramakrishna as the spiritual teacher. So the new topic is Sri Ramakrishna as the spiritual teacher. Swami Shardanandaji Maharaj is quoting the Bhagavad Gita and is telling in the second chapter, the 29th verse, in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna is telling, some look upon it as strange, others speak of it as strange, others again hear of it as strange, though hearing, seeing and speaking, no one knows it fully. So this is spoken about of the Lord. It's very difficult to understand God. With our reasoning, with our intellect, with our very small mind, it's very, very difficult to understand God. That is what Lord Krishna is telling. Some look upon it as strange, others speak of it as strange, others again hear it of it as strange. Though those who have seen Sri Ramakrishna but a few times and have had only a superficial acquaintance with him are often amazed to hear about his divine support with the devotees as their spiritual teacher. They consider all such talks as downright falsehood. Again, when they find that a good many people are speaking in the same strain, they think. These people have formed a group and hatched a plan to raise Sri Ramakrishna into a divinity. They are going to add one more to the already existing 333 million of deities. Why? Are not the existing deities sufficient for you? Why do you not select any one or more from amongst them? Why increase the number by another? How strange. These followers do not understand that when their falsehood is detected, people will lose all respect for such a pure soul. Have we not seen him? How humble he was, how meek, how patient, how devoid of egoism, lowlier than the lowliest. You say you have also seen that he could not at all put up with being addressed as a spiritual teacher. He would not at all like that anybody addressing him as a guru, a father. If somebody called him a guru or a father Baba or a patriarch, he would burst out. God is the only spiritual teacher, father, and patriarch. I am the lowliest of the lowliest. I am the lowliest of the lowly, a servant of the servants, equal to a hair on your body, a tiny hair at that, by no means a big one. And saying so, he would immediately take the dust of your feet and place it on his own head. Has anyone witnessed a more humble attitude? And it is this very person whom they are making into a spiritual teacher and God, which he was not. It is because of the possibility of such controversies being carried on for an indefinite period that we are prompted to put in a few words about Master's mood as a spiritual teacher, as we have seen and heard. For, as a matter of fact, The conviction that every being, from the highest down to the lowest, is God Himself. For Shardanand Maharaj is telling, as a matter of fact, the conviction that every being, from the highest down to the lowest, is God Himself, was so firmly ingrained in him that the attitude of a servant, not only of men, but all of the living beings, was normal to him. It is no doubt a fact that during his normal state of consciousness, he regarded himself as lowlier than the lowliest, humbler than the humblest, and took the dust of the feet of all. And that at that time he could not really endure being addressed as a spiritual teacher, a father, or patriarch. Nevertheless, we cannot deny the truth of the Master's extraordinary exploits when the mood of the spiritual teacher was on him. Then, under the influence of divine power manifested in him, he became its instrument, and by a mere touch, he could put anyone in samadhi or deep meditation, or in the inebriation of divine bliss never felt before. It was a fact that a sort of overpowering feeling, like the intoxication produced by smoking too much hemp, was felt at that time. We have seen some reeling. In the Master's case, it was so much that it beggars description. Under the overpowering feeling of that intoxication, he reeled so much that he had to take hold of someone of us in order to be able to walk at that time. People thought that he had taken too much of intoxicants. Or when we found that by the exercise of a mysterious power, he could remove so much of the impurity of one's mind as to make one feel immediately an undreamt of concentration of mind, purity, and bliss, and to induce in one a sense of fulfillment in life and a mood of absolute self surrender at his feet. Then we could not but concede that the Master was not the lowliest of the lowly, but a strange divine power manifesting itself through him in play, Leela, and making him behave that way. Then we felt that Sri Ramakrishna, the Master, as the revealer of the supreme abode of the Divine Lord, was indeed the spiritual teacher and the savior of human beings who, blinded by the darkness of ignorance, scorched by the three kinds of misery. So, what are the three kinds of misery? It's called tapatraya. In this world, all of us are troubled by the three kinds of misery. Tapa, traya. Traya means three, tapa means misery. That's why when we tell the Shanti mantras, in the end we repeat it, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, three times. And also, we also see that we have the three bodies, the gross body, subtle body, and the causal body. So, to remove the problems, the misery at all the three levels. Here, misery that pertains to the body is Adi Bhautika, that caused by other animals, and that due to an due to the unusual effects of natural power, that is lightning, flood, storm, earthquake, etc., that caused by the animals and other dangers caused by that, it is called one of the miseries. And the other one, unusual effect of the natural powers and lightning, flood, storm, etc. is Adi Daivika, Adi Bhautika, Adhyatmika. So the three types of miseries, to overcome them, that is called Tapatraya. So people who are in the darkness of ignorance caused by the three kinds of misery, the suffering from the disease of worldliness have been reduced to utter helplessness, keeping this divine state of the master in view. The devotees used to use the expression spiritual teacher, that is Guru, the merciful one, the Lord, and so on. In this age, we have actually seen in Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna this true humility of a devotee and this wonderful divine mood of the spiritual teacher, contradictory though they might appear coexisting in one person. And because we have seen that, we are now trying to present to the reader what little we have understood about how they can exist together in the same mind. We feel diffident to explain correctly even the little we have understood, and it goes without saying that it is beyond the power of both the writer, that is Shardanandaji Maharaj, and the reader, all of us, to explain and understand it perfectly. For there was no limit to the moods, that is the spiritual feelings of Sri Ramakrishna was established in Bhavamukha. The master used to say, there is no limit to the divine Lord. It is our personal experience that there was also no limit to the bhava, the spiritual moods of this extraordinary personage. As soon as people hear that the master used to dwell incessantly in Bhavamukha, they generally jump to the wrong conclusion that he was not a man of Vedantic knowledge and that he always lived his life in the midst of emotional surges of pain and pleasure arising from the separation from and union with the Divine Lord. That is devotional mood. But a correct appreciation of the present subject would be possible only if we have a clear grasp of what it is to be in Bhavamukha and under what condition it is possible. Therefore, let us here discuss briefly once again the state of being in Bhavamukha from a different standpoint. The reader will recall that Sri Ramakrishna attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi in one day and remained in that state for 3 days and nights at a stretch. Now, Shardanandaji Maharaj is taking recourse to a different type of teaching us or discussing, that is through question and answer. He will himself take the role of a Purva Paksha, the opposition, and then he will himself answer taking the other person's role. Now, the question of the opposition. What is Nirvikalpa Samadhi? To which now Shardanandaji Maharaj has posed the question, Purva Paksha, and now he himself will take up the position of the person who will answer it. He is replying, what is Nirvikalpa Samadhi? To this question, to bring the mind to the state in which it is completely freed from all mentations. Nirvikalpa Samadhi, to bring the mind to the state in which it is completely freed from all mentation. Chitta vritti, rising of different mentations, mind modifications. Now the next question, what are mentations? Reply, they include all type of mental modifications such as the perception of the objects of external world, consisting of sights, tastes, etc., the feelings of pain, pleasure, etc., the faculties like cogitation, imagination, inference, and the desires such as I will do this, I will understand that, I will enjoy this, I will renounce this, and so on. The next question is, On what do these modifications depend for their existence? First of all, we will go back to the workings of the mind and then understand these questions and answers. What is meant by these mental modifications or mentations? In yoga, that is Hindu psychology, it is called as chitta vritti. Mind is made out of the mental stuff. It's called chitta. Mind is also matter. The matter with which the mind is made out of, the subtle matter, it is called chitta. So it modifies, it has modifications, it has mentations, different forms, it takes different modifications. That is called vritti, chitta vritti. Whenever we get the thoughts, whenever we see through the indriyas, there are so many things coming to the mind. We hear something, we see something, we smell something, we taste something, we touch something. So all the five sense organs give in so many experiences. And also we have so many memories and so many thoughts process will come up in our mind due to the exposure to the nature. And also already we had so many experiences, all that memory is there stored in our mind. All this continuously brings up so many modifications, so many varieties of chitta vrittis in our mind. So those things are called as mentations. These are constantly rising in our mind, not allowing to see our real nature that is within. Within us is the Atman or God in our own heart, who is the nearest of the nearest, who is the eternal witness. As in Kathopanishad, it is told that all the indriyas, the sense organs, are kept outgoing. They will take you out to the world. The eyes will take you to out and make you see the things outside. The nose will try to smell things outside. The ears will make you hear things outside. The mouth will make you, the tongue will make you taste things outside. The skin will make you feel things outside. So everything, every indriyas are taking you to the outside world. But the Lord, the witness, that is your real nature, the Atman, is sitting within. So nobody can see it. It is all outgoing. And it is creating so much of modifications and chitta vritti in your mind that it will not allow you to see the Lord who is there. So, what is the first sutra or the mantra of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the Raja Yoga? Yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. The aim of yoga is to stop this mental modification. Nirodha, chitta vritti nirodha. Then, when the mind is calm, when the mind is quiet, then automatically you need not put in any effort. You will see the Lord who is already there within you. So, that is the goal of yoga. So, now from this standpoint of view, you can understand what is Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So, Nirvikalpa Samadhi is now Shardananda Jumaj is applying to that question to bring the mind to the state in which it is completely freed from all modifications or mentations. Now, the question is, what are mentation? To which the answer given by Shardananda Maharaj is, they include all mental modifications because of the things coming, the thoughts coming from all the indriyas from outside world into our mind. The mind takes so many different types of waves. There will be ripples. Another example can be given. Now there is a clear pond. Let us equate, let us imagine or compare our mind to a clear, neat pond of water or a lake. So now it is placid, no waves, nothing. It's so fine. You can see many times the bottom of the lake or the pond can be visible when there is no disturbance on the surface. It is very clear, no ripples, no waves. So then you can see the bottom so nicely. Likewise, when the mind is still, it is calm, no waves, it is not in patterns, then you can see the Lord who is within the bottom. That is the Atmaswarupa, the light, the Parabrahma who is within you can be seen. But take a stone and throw it to the pond, that placid pond or the lake. Then immediately what happens? There will be ripples, there will be waves. So, or take a stick or some mud or throw some color into it, then again the bottom cannot be seen. The lake or the pond, the water becomes dirty and you cannot see the bottom. So likewise, each thought, each cognition, everything coming from outside, the ears tells you something, the eyes makes you look something, the skin makes you feel something, the pressure or the heat or the cold, whatever from the outside world, the nose makes you smell something, the tongue makes you taste something, and all those thoughts coming in will create ripples. Like each time, at a time, 5 stones are thrown in, 5 different things are put into your mind, colors are put in. So the disturbance comes up, and there'll be so many millions of modification waves in your mind that you cannot see the bottom, the Lord who is within. So this example also can make you feel what is this Nirvikalpa Samadhi, what is this mentation. So to stop this mentation, to stop this mental modification taking into waves is the goal of yoga. When the mind is calm, then you can see the Lord who is within, who is infinite bliss, who is infinite peace, who is infinite security, who is infinite knowledge, existence, and everything. So everything incomplete is within you. You are a total personality, Purnaha, complete. But you can't see this, so you think you are incomplete, and you feel that you are, because of these waves modification, you feel that you are in danger, you are in the fear of death, you have the phobias, you have so many things. I want that thing, I want this thing, desire comes up. Then there will be so much of jealousies, there will be so much of hatred, there will be so much of likes and dislike, and there will be so much of anger. All these things comes up because you don't see who you are, who really you are, how much strength you have. When you come to know you are the emperor, you are full of strength, there is no dread of anything, you are complete, then your mind can become calm. The mind will not allow, because the mind will get destroyed if it allows to see the person who is within. It is just like the mind is like a thief. Now, if the policeman comes to know he is the thief, then the thief cannot play anything. So he will try to hide everything from the policeman and not allow to see who is the thief. Likewise, mind will bring in so many ripples, so many waves, and so many modifications within that stuff that it will not allow you to see the reality within, the Atmaswarupa, the God within. The moment it is seen, the mind has to die. So the mind doesn't want to show it. It want to play, it want to leave, it want to continue. So to stop all this mental modification, the waves is the goal of yoga. And now we are coming to know what are that modification, what are that waves, what is that chitta vritti, which is not allowing to see the God within. That is my real nature. So all that is given by Shardanandji Maharaj here, they include all mental modifications such as perception of the objects of external world consisting of sight, taste, and all the other 5 things are included. So they're telling only 2. Sight, because if you go on again and again repeating, it will give us less time. So if they tell sight, taste, we have to include all, etc. We have to include all the other things. So sight is of the eyes, taste is of the tongue, then smell, then touch, then sound. All the 5 has to be included if they tell sight, taste, etc. So that is the things which are coming from the sensation from the all the 5 sense organs, the feeling of pain, pleasure, etc. So they are the dualities. You get different things from the external world, the dual nature. It is the same thing: heat, cold, pain, pleasure, victory, failure. So they come in the form of these dualities. Everything, every sensation in the world, external world, comes in these 2 forms, is the same, 2 sides of the same coin. And then faculties like cogitation, imagination, inference. So these are also things, the capacity of the mind, cogitate to understand the when the feeling comes, you take some decision, cogitation, then imagination. You'll start imagining thing from the memory. Then we have inference, anumana, etc. All these things, the faculties of the mind, and the desires such as I will do this, I will understand this. So this is concerned with the ego. I will enjoy this, I will renounce this, and so on. All these things, the different workings of the mind is called mentation or mental modification. So now the next question is, on what do these mental modification depend for their existence? Is the next question. To which Shardanandaji Maharaj is replying. So again, not the question, on what do these modifications depend for their existence? To which reply was, on the awareness of I. The I, if the consciousness of I vanishes or is stopped altogether for some time, there can be no modification in the mind, nor can it grip the mind during that period. Because of the presence of this mind, intellect, and all the things, nearness of the Atman with these things, there arises another similar looking reality, which think is the owner, the master, and which feels it is real, that is called ego. So because of the nearness of the Atman, the real power, the mind, when it comes near to the Atman, because it is in the presence of the Atman, there will be another wrong thing or the imaginative thing coming up, which doesn't have existence. It looks like reality, though it is not the reality, because of the presence or the nearest of Atman, that is called ego. So this ego, the I, the sense of I, Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling that all the mental modifications, all the workings of the mind depend for their existence on the awareness of I, the ego, the individuality. If the consciousness of I vanishes, if this ego is taken away or it is stopped altogether for some time, then there can be no mental modification at all. Because all these things, the mind gives up, makes up this modification and is trying to show what this world, external world is to the false I, that is the ego. So he is the witness now, he is the doer. I think that ego which I am feeling with this body mind complex, I develop some sort of ego. I identify with that, the individuality. So the mind thinks he is the master of this whole complex. And so the whole modification of the mind will go and give everything to that person, to that false ego. So the moment if this ego is not there, the mental modification, for whom will it work? Suppose there is no owner of the company collapses. Nobody is there to pay the salary. Nobody is there to look after the company. So if the owner of the company is not there, the manager of the company collapses. So likewise, the mind and other feelings and everything happening in the mind, the modification, the meditations, the cogitation, everything happens because it is to report to the owner, the false owner. Now it thinks that ego is the false, that ego to be the owner, and it has to report to him. The moment ego vanishes, is not there, then whom will all these mind and other things go on to report? They have nobody to report. So the mind will stop function. There will be no mentation. They all depend for their existence on these false things called ego, the I sense, the doya, the sense of agency. So to the question, on what does these modification depend for the existence? To which Shardananda Maharaj is replying, on the awareness of I. If the consciousness of I vanishes, is stopped altogether for some time, there can be no modification in the mind, nor can it grip the mind during that period. Now, the next question, it is a fact that in the condition of the swoon, when you become unconscious, the swoon, and deep sleep, also the knowledge of I vanishes. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, then something like that. Is Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when all these mental modifications stop, you see the Paramatman, is it similar to becoming unconscious or swooning? Is it similar to swoon? To which Shardananda Maharaj to that question is replying, no, no. In swoon, that is unconscious state when you fall down in epileptic swoon or something, or deep sleep, the consciousness of I continues inwardly. In your deep sleep, you will be having no, in the dream state also, you will be having that I sense. Even in deep sleep, that I sense is there. Even in the swoon, still that I sense ego is there, it is not destroyed. So it is not equal to the deep sleep and the swooning state or the dream state. The consciousness of I continues inwardly, but the instrument called the brain, with the help of which the mind manifests self consciousness, becomes inactive and ceases to function for some time. That is, all the modification continue to crowd at the bottom of the mind. The master gave the example of pigeons sitting with inflated throats after eating peas and cooing. You think there is nothing within their throat, but you feel them with your hands. You feel you will find peas all crowding there. The next question, how am I to know that I consciousness continues in that way in a swoon, unconscious state, or in deep sleep? How shall I know it? To which the reply is by observing the result. For example, on those occasions, the heartbeat, the pulse, the circulation of blood, etc., are not stopped, it is still continuing. All these physical activities to take place centering on the eye consciousness. Moreover, although the external signs of swoon or deep sleep are somewhat similar to those of samadhi, when man returns to the ordinary waking state, the amount of knowledge and bliss in respect of the former continues only as before. Former means in the swoon or deep sleep, the knowledge he gets, the bliss he gets, will not be increased. It will be the same or it may be worse than before. But the knowledge and bliss he gets after the Nirvikalpa Samadhi will be infinite. So that is the difference. You can know the difference by that, by the bliss and the knowledge. So this makes the difference. The person who has gone to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when he comes back as a man of wisdom, as a man of perfection, with infinite knowledge and infinite bliss and wisdom. A person who goes to swoon, he is unconscious or in deep sleep. When he comes back the same ignorant person with the same knowledge, with the same ignorance, no bliss, no knowledge. So that is the difference. You can make the difference here. The amount of knowledge and the bliss and respect of the former continues only as before. That is, there is not the least increase or decrease of the knowledge or the bliss or the ananda. For example, the negative qualities, the lust of the lustful remains as it was after the swoon or the deep sleep. But when the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi is attained, these modifications cannot raise their heads anymore. Now, the lust, the anger, the ego, the jealousies, all those things will vanish if you go to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And when you come back, all the negative tendencies will cannot raise their head, they will be destroyed. That is the difference. These modifications cannot raise their heads anymore. There will be no restlessness, there will be no anxiety, there will be no tension, there will be no worries, there will be no depression, because you have got infinite joy and infinite knowledge. So they cannot raise their any modifications, any troubles, any negativity cannot raise their heads anymore. Extraordinary knowledge and infinite bliss fills the mind. Extraordinary knowledge and infinite bliss, not ordinary bliss, infinite bliss fills the mind. And doubts, such as whether there is the next world, or whether there is God, whether there is Atman, what happens to me before death or after death, all the doubts will vanish. So the doubts will completely, all the doubts, all the questions will vanish completely, vanish forever on account of the direct realization of God. So there'll be no doubt. All the doubts, samshaya, bhidyante, chidhyante, all the granthis, all the confusion clears off. It becomes clear. It will be so perfect, so full of infinite knowledge. So where is the question of doubt? You have realized it completely. So that is the difference between Nirvikalpa Samadhi and a swoon or unconscious state, dream state, or deep sleep state. That's the difference. Now we have come to know. Shardanandaji has explained what is Nirvikalpa Samadhi, what is mental modifications, how the mind is functioning, what is a false ego. Examples have been given. What is the difference between a swoon, unconscious state, deep sleep, dream state, and the Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Everything, the Turiya Avastha, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Turiya Avastha, the real state, has been explained now. Now the next question crops up. Yes, I see. Granted that the I consciousness completely vanished for some time when the master was in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But what then? After that, when he comes back from Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the I consciousness has to come back. Then what after that? To which the reply was, well, when the I consciousness vanished this way, he had for some time the direct vision of the Divine Mother, the cause of the universe. Not satisfied with that, the 3 day vision, he tried to have it continuously. Now the next question comes up. What was the state of Master's mind as a result of that attempt? And what were the signs manifested in his body indicating that state? So when you get this earlier answer, now the Purva Pakshi, the man with questions and doubts, is asking the question. Now Sharda Nandaji Maharaj himself is asking all your questions and he is answering all that. Next question is, what was the state of Sri Ramakrishna's mind as a result of that attempt, and what were the signs manifested in his body indicating that state? To which Sharadanandaji is replying, sometimes by the complete merging of I consciousness, the symptoms of death appeared on the body externally, and the unobstructed vision of Divine Mother internally. Sometimes again, with the reappearance of a little of the I consciousness, symptoms of life returned slightly, and the vision of the Divine Mother continued. Though a little obstructed because of the intervention of the screen of the mind, which was then pure, transparent, and holy, owing to the preponderance of sattva. Thus, sometimes there was the vanishing of the I consciousness, the complete cessation of mental modification, and the full direct vision of Divine Mother. Again, sometimes there was the resurgence of a little of I consciousness, accompanied by slight modification of the mind and a slightly obstructed vision of the Divine Mother. This reoccurred again and again. To which the next question is, how long did he continue to make that attempt? Replying, continuously for 6 months. Next question, 6 months. How then did this body last? The body should have been dead by that time, 6 months. For a human body cannot last without food for 6 months. Besides, you also say that although Sri Ramakrishna's eye consciousness revived now and then, during that period it never manifested itself in his body to such an extent as to make activities like the taking of the food, digestion of the food, assimilation possible. To which, to this question, the reply is it is true that his body would not have lasted. He had not the slightest desire to prolong the life of the body, yet his body survived because the Mother of the Universe wanted to manifest her wonderful spiritual powers through that body for the good of the humanity. So she made it to survive. Next question. That may be so. How did the mother assume? How did the Divine Mother assume a form and come to feed the Master by force for the 6 months? The answer is yes, it was something somewhat like that. For a holy man arrived there of himself at that time, nobody knows from where. He clearly understood Sri Ramakrishna's state, which was almost like that of a dead man, was a result of his practice of yoga and of his feeling of oneness with the Divine Lord. The holy man stayed for those 6 months at the Kali temple and tried to bring Sri Ramakrishna down to the little body consciousness even by striking his body. And when he saw that a little consciousness was returning, he would immediately thrust a morsel or two of food into the master's mouth. We do not know why the holy man felt this unusual eagerness and keen interest in keeping alive an altogether unknown person called Ramakrishna, who was dead and inert to all appearances outside world. Incidents like this have to be explained by only as caused by the divine will. Therefore, what else shall we say except that such an impossible event became possible by the direct will and power of the Divine Mother, in order that the Master's Sri Ramakrishna's body might be kept alive? So now the next question is, yes, I see. What happened afterwards? Now Shardanandaji Maharaj replies, then the Mother of the Universe, who is none but the Divine Lord or the cosmic consciousness manifested as this universe, pervading in and through all beings, sentient and insentient, and appearing as diverse names and forms, commanded Sri Ramakrishna, the Master, to remain in Bhava Mukha. To this answer, the next question arises. What does this Bhava Mukha means? What is the meaning of Bhava Mukha? To which Shardanandaji Maharaj replies, we shall presently explain it. But to comprehend what Bhavamukha is, it is necessary to understand the mental state of Sri Ramakrishna at that time, as far as it is possible to do so with the help of our imaginative faculty. Because we have to imagine so many things now, because we can't understand it, we are not in a higher state. So some things we can understand only by little imagination. So now we have to use our imaginative faculty as much as possible. We have said that at that time, his eye consciousness sometimes vanished altogether and sometimes reappeared just a little. Even when the little eye consciousness returned, the universe did not appear to him as it appears to us. The world appeared to him as an immense mind in which innumerable waves of ideas were rising, surging, and merging. His own body, mind, and eye consciousness, not to speak of those of others, seemed to be but a component wave in that immense mind. In that state of the master, in that state, the master had the direct experience and vision of the real nature of that universal consciousness, and power as the one without second, as the one living and wide awake being, as the source of all will, as the source of all will and action, as the mother of infinite grace. It is the same being whom the self styled materialistic scholars of the West, looking through their clouded intellect and scientific instruments, view as inert and insentient, though admitting its unity. Sri Ramakrishna saw further that the one without second is itself divided into two aspects of saguna with attributes and nirguna without attributes. It is this that is called swagata beda, difference in identity in the scriptures. The idea that an immense I-ness pervades everything from the creator Brahma down to the lowest created being, like a microbe or a protoplasm or amoeba or whatever. He saw that the infinite number of waves of ideas was rising in that cosmic mind, that the limited eyes of men perceived these waves of idea in parts and mistook them as an external world. It is now a little necessary to understand now what is that? What are we perceiving here as the world, external world? What we see? Well, now we can get a scientific idea. What are we perceiving as the external world? What is this? What are we seeing now as this world outside with all everything, every experience? So the infinite number of waves of idea arising in the cosmic mind, the universal mind. So that is seen by the limited eye of our mind. So we, the limited eye, with this limited mind, perceive those infinite number of waves of ideas arising from the cosmic mind, the universal mind, as this world. Whatever we are seeing is nothing but the infinite waves rising out in that cosmic mind. The imagination, the dream of the Ishvara, the Saguna Brahma, is appearing to us as this world. What we are seeing, everything, feeling, is nothing but the dream, the mental waves of the cosmic mind is perceived to us, the little eye, as this world. Whatever we see is nothing but the projection. Just like in a cinema, when you go to the movie, the projector projects the whole movie on the screen. So, like that, everything is projected there, and we perceive all over whatever we see, it becomes so realistic to us. Isn't it something special? And also, it is a little confusing. Okay, let us now try to understand this and go forward. So, the limited eye of men perceived these waves of ideas of the cosmic mind in parts. Only in parts we can see it because our mind is too small, our intellect is too small, and we mistook them as the external world. So, this notion of the external world, we mistake, we mistook that mental waves, the ideas emanating from the cosmic mind, we perceive as this world. We mistook them as the external world of objects and spoke and dealt with them accordingly. Sri Ramakrishna also saw the limited eye had their being in and performed their work with the strength of that unlimited eye, and that because of their inability to grasp and understand the unlimited eye, the limited one regards themselves as possessed of free will and power of action. So now Shardanandaji is also explaining what's meant by free will. Why do we get this idea of free will? Sri Ramakrishna now also saw that the limited I of ours, the ego, the limited I, had their being in and performed their work with the strength of that unlimited I, because we are doing all the work from the strength of the unlimited I. And that because of their inability to grasp and understand the unlimited I, the limited persons we are, regard ourselves as possessed of free will and power of action. But in reality, it is the power of that unlimited I or the Lord or the Ishvara. It is this spiritual blindness that is called in the scriptures as avidya or ignorance. My God, so many good things have been explained at the thought level, at the mind level, at the psychological level. Sharadanandaji Maharaj, through these question and answers, has explained wonderful truths. It's so revealing, so wonderful. So, because of our inability to grasp and understand the unlimited I, the limited ones that we are, regard ourselves as possessed of free will. Why do we get this idea of free will and power of action? It is this spiritual blindness, because of our limited I, identifying with this limited I, it is this spiritual blindness that is called in the scriptures as avidya. What is avidya or ignorance? It's been explained so nicely. What is avidya? What is ignorance? This spiritual blindness, though all the strength, all the power of action, everything is coming from that unlimited I. Because of our small limited I, we think that I am doing this. I'm the owner, I'm the master, I'm the doer, I'm enjoying this. So that feeling is arisen, though all that power. The beautiful example given by Ramakrishna to understand this about the vegetables. You cut the vegetables and start cooking. Every vegetable, the potato will come up when the water is heated up, convention. So it goes up, convection. So when it goes up, the potato thinks I'm great. Then carrot will come up, it will think I'm great. It goes up and comes down. So other vegetables comes up, the beans comes up, and then tell I am great. Everybody is telling I am great, I am great, I am great. But the moment the fire is put off, everything settled down. So all the vegetables will come to know, oh, it was not we, because of our strength that we were coming up. It was the strength of the fire which was transmitted to the water, and through that power of the fire, we were jumping up. All this time, we thought that it was our power and we were egoistic. So, likewise, that spiritual blindness, that is called in the scriptures as avidya and ignorance. It is this universal I-ness existing between the aspect of saguna. Saguna means with attributes, and nirguna, without attributes. That is called bhava mukha. Again, I'll go through that. It is this universal I-ness, the universal I-ness existing between the aspects of God, that is saguna, with attribute, and the nirguna, without attributes. That is called bhava mukha. The universal I-ness existing between the aspects of saguna and nirguna, that is called bhava mukha. For infinite ideas owe their manifestation to that all pervading I-ness. This universal I is the I of the Ishvara, God or Divine Mother. In their attempt to describe the nature of this immense I, the Vaishnava teachers I've called it as divine Sri Krishna, the embodiment of pure consciousness, which is of the nature of inconceivable difference in non-difference, achintya bheda bheda. When the I consciousness of the master vanished altogether, he remained in oneness with the unqualified being of the Divine Mother, beyond the limits of this all-pervading I. And with the vanishing of this individual I, vanished also the last vestige of that infinite waves of ideas emerging from that immense I, which we call the universe. Again, when a little of the I consciousness manifested itself in him, he saw both the I, the immense Saguna with attributes, and also the idea in it, united with or in non separation from the Nirguna aspect of the Divine Mother, the formless and attributeless. In other words, as soon as he attained the Nirguna state, the existence of the difference in identity in that one without a second vanished from the master's consciousness. And when he was conscious of that Saguna immenseness, he felt that what is Brahman is verily Shakti, and what is called the Nirguna is verily the Saguna. Prakriti, power in manifestation, is really what is Purusha, pure consciousness. The motionless snake is now moving, that's all. That is that which is Nirguna in its own nature is Saguna in sport. So that God which was formless, when it was not moving like the snake, when not in motion, it becomes the Saguna in sport, in motion, that is the motion, the snake in motion. So that would be the condition of the mind of Sri Ramakrishna when in Bhavamukha. The motionless snake is now moving. That is, that which is the Nirguna in its own nature is Saguna in sport. After he had the full direct vision of the nature of the Divine Mother in the combined aspects of Nirguna and Saguna, the master got the command, remain in this state, remain in Bhavamukha. That is, do not remain in the Nirguna by the complete mergence of the I-ness, but live your life and do good to the people, being in constant, complete and immediate knowledge of the fact that you are none other than the limitless I, from which all kinds of ideas as the universe springs, and that your desire and actions are verily its desire and actions. I will go through that a little, go back a little. Now the Divine Mother commanded, remain in Bhavamukha, meaning do not remain in that formless, attributeless Nirguna by the complete mergence of that I-ness, but live your life and do good to people, being in constant, complete and immediate knowledge of the fact that you are none other than that limitless I, from which all kinds of idea as the universe springs, and that your desire and actions are verily its desire and actions. So that state, Divine Mother has commanded and put Ramakrishna to it, thus to have the direct experience and conviction or feeling in all respects, at all times, and in all states, that I am that immense I, what is called the ripe I, is the meaning of remaining in Bhavamukha. When one reaches the state of Bhavamukha, all the ideas such as I am the son of so and so, I am the father of so and so, I am from this caste, a higher caste, a lower caste, I am a Brahmana, I am a Kshatriya, I am a Shudra, and so on, are completely washed off from the mind, and no signs of them is left. There will be no idea that I have a black skin, a white skin, a brown skin, or a yellow skin, and no one always feel that one And one always feels that you are that immense I pervading the vast, inconceivable universe. So all the differences vanish in that state. Sri Ramakrishna, therefore, always taught us, my children, all the I's, such as I am the son of so and so, I am the father of so and so, I'm a Shudra, I'm a Brahmana, I'm a European, I'm a Indian, I'm the Pandit, a scholar, I am rich, and so on. These are all unripe I. They bring about bondage. Give up these and think I am his devotee. I am the son of God. I am the part of Lord. Keep this mood firm in your mind. Or he would say, tie the non-dual knowledge, Advaita Gnana, in the hem of your cloth and then do whatever you like. The reader will perhaps say, was not then Sri Ramakrishna a true follower of doctrine of non-dualism? Did he not accept the full implication of the non-dual doctrine founded by Shankaracharya, in which the very existence of the universe has been denied? For Sri Ramakrishna, you say, upheld a difference in the Divine Mother herself, Swagata Beda Beda, and saw her existence in the two different aspects of Nirguna as well as Saguna? No, it is not exactly that. The master accepted all the three doctrines of non-dualism, Advaita, the qualified non-dualism, Vishishtadvaita, and dualism Dvaita. But he used to say, these three doctrines are accepted by the human mind according to the stages of its progress. In one stage of the mind, dualism finds acceptance. The two, the other two are there then felt to be wrong. In the higher stages of spiritual progress, the doctrine of qualified non-dualism is regarded as true. One then feels that the reality, which in itself is eternally devoid of attributes, exists in sport as always possessed of attributes. One then cannot but feel that not only is dualism wrong, but there is no truth in non-dualism also. Finally, when man reaches the ultimate limit of spiritual progress with the help of sadhana, he experiences the nirguna nature of Divine Mother and remains in oneness with her. All the ideas such as I and you, subject and object, bondage and liberation, vice and virtue, merit and demerit, are then all merged in that one. So, in connection with this topic, Sri Ramakrishna mentioned the experience of Hanuman, who was a bright example of Dasya attitude of devotion, the servant attitude. He said, at one time, Ramachandra asked Hanuman, his servant, Hanuman, what is your attitude towards me? How do you look upon, think of, and worship me? Now, to which Hanuman replied, O Rama, when I am conscious of my body, in other words, when I feel I am this visible body, I have the conviction that thou art the Lord and I am the servant. Thou art the one to be served and I am the one to serve. Thou art the one to be worshipped and I am the one to worship. And when I am conscious of myself as the individual self, one with the mind, the intellect, and the soul, I have the conviction that thou art the whole and I am a part. And when again I remain in samadhi, in the mode of the I am the pure self devoid of all qualifying adjuncts, I have the conviction that I am the verily, I am also verily that which thou art. That is, I am one with Sri Ramachandra. and thou and I are one, there being no difference whatsoever. Sri Ramakrishna said, one who has realized that non dual state becomes silent. Non dualism, Advaita, is not a matter to be described. As soon as one tries to speak and say something, dualism becomes inevitable. As long as there are thought, imagination, etc., there is also dualism within the mind. Non dual knowledge has not yet been attained. It is only the reality of Brahman, in other words, the Nirguna aspect of Divine Mother alone, that has not been contacted by the mouth and thereby defiled. That is, it has not been expressed by human speech. For this truth is beyond human mind and intellect. How can it be spoken of or explained by words? That is why Sri Ramakrishna said about the non dual truth, my children, it is the ultimate truth to be realized. The Master therefore used to say, as long as the idea of I, you, and the bodily functions like speaking, walking, etc., are there, one must accept in practice both the aspect of Nirguna and Saguna, or as they are otherwise called, Nitya, the absolute, and the Leela, the relative. You are then, for all practical purposes, a qualified non dualist, that is Vishishtadvaita. Though you may talk of non dualism, many were the example that the Master gave to illustrate this. He said, take for example the natural and the reverse order of the musical scale. When you are learning the music, you raise the pitch of your voice in the natural order of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. And lower in the reverse order, do, si, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do, or sa, ni, da, pa, ma, ga, ri, sa. Similarly, you realize the knowledge of non-duality in samadhi, come down again, and then remain in the I consciousness. Again, Ramakrishna used to give the example of a bilva fruit. Take a bilva fruit in your hand and try to ascertain which of the three, the outer shell, seeds, or the pulp, is the fruit. At first, you discard the shell as not being the substance and do the same with the seeds. And then, on isolating the pulp, say that that is the real bilva fruit. Then, after that comes the decision that the shell, like the seeds, belongs to what the pulp is made out of. It is the shell, seeds, and the pulp that altogether make the bilva fruit. Similarly, after directly knowing the absolute, comes the conclusion that that which is the absolute is in sport, the reality. What a wonderful example of the bilva fruit has been given and compared with the absolute and the relative. By removing the sheets of the stem of the banana plant, you reach the pith and think that to be the essence. Then comes the realization that it is to the sheets and the pith belongs, and it is to the pith that the sheets belong. It is both these together that makes the stem. And another example given by Sri Ramakrishna, which you can understand easily, is, and just as when one goes on removing the coats of the onion, nothing is left over. You go on removing the onion, coat of the onion, the skin of the onion. When you complete it, nothing is left over. In order to ascertain the self, when one goes on eliminating the body, the mind, the intellect, etc., and make sure that none of these is the self, one finds that there is nothing separate called I, but everything is He and nothing but He. It is like the saying, it is my Ganga. You go to the river and you will tell, this portion of Ganga is mine. It is my Ganga, by putting a fence around the part of the water of the Ganga. But Ganga, the water Ganga doesn't belong to anybody. You are fencing it in telling that is my Ganga. Now let us come to the main topic. Again, it is needless to say that when Sri Ramakrishna was having the full knowledge of his universal I in Bhavamukha, he dwelt in the realm of Vidya Maya, the Maya leading Godwards. A few steps below the attributeless being of the Divine Mother, and was seeing the manifestation of the many from the one. But even while experiencing that many, the knowledge of that one was so clear that Sri Ramakrishna felt quite fully that it was he who was doing, thinking, and saying whatever anyone in the world was doing, thinking, and saying. Note this word, note this sentence, it's very, very important. While Sri Ramakrishna was experiencing many, the knowledge of that one was so clear that Sri Ramakrishna felt quite fully that it was he was doing, thinking, and saying whatever anyone in the world was doing, thinking, and saying. Even a glimpse of this state is very wonderful. The master said that when one day a man was walking upon a bed of grass or on a lawn, Sri Ramakrishna was feeling very much hurt in the chest, as if it was on his chest that the man was walking. In fact, the blood in his chest coagulated to produce black marks, and he began to writhe in pain. The mood of the I am the servant of the Divine Mother, I am her devotee, I am her child, or I am a part of her, was always there in Sri Ramakrishna's mind when he came further down to the lowest state of the realm of Maya. And still further down is the realm of the Avidya Maya, the Maya leading away from God, or that of the lust, anger, worldly attachment. By constant practice, his mind never descended to this state, or to put it in another way, the Divine Mother prevented its descent to that realm. The Master used to say, the Mother prevents one who has taken complete refuge in her from taking a wrong step. Therefore, we find that after he attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the limited or the unripe I in him vanished completely, and the little of the I that was left over was united for all eternity with the immense or the ripe I. That I sometimes used to feel that it was a part or a limb of the universal I, and again approaching nearer and nearer to that all pervading I, used to merge in it. It was through this process that he came to know all the ideas of all minds. For it is this immense I that is the source from which all the ideas of all the minds in the world spring. Sri Ramakrishna was able to know and understand all the waves of ideas rising in all the minds in the universe, only because he could remain identified with all that all pervading I. In that high state, Sri Ramakrishna's mood, I am a part of the Divine Lord, also gradually vanished. And the universal I, or what we may call the eye of the Divine Mother, manifested itself through him as the spiritual teacher, possessing the power of bestowing grace and inflicting punishment. Therefore, the Master did not then appear to be the humblest of the humble. Instead, all his actions, such as his movements, behavior with others, etc., assumed a different form. He, like the mythical wish fulfilling tree, then asked the devotees what they wanted. We saw the master at Dakshineshwar daily assume that mode in order to bestow his grace on special devotees. And again we saw him in that mode on January 1, 1886, Kalpataru Day, which is fast approaching, which will be our next program, the Kalpataru Day. On that day, he was in that mode and by his touch transmitted spirituality to or awakened the dormant spiritual power in the devotee present there. That is a wonderful story. It will not be out of place to narrate it here. So now Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling how at that time he was in that state of Guru, bestowing grace. So now he wants to explain about the incident during January 1 when Sri Ramakrishna became a Kalpataru, the Guru who is ready to give whatever they wanted, the boon, the wishes. It was the first day of January 1886. It was a little more than 2 weeks since the devotees had brought Sri Ramakrishna, according to the advice of Dr. Mahendra Lal Sarkar, to a garden house at Kashipur in the north of Calcutta belonging to Gopal Babu, the son-in-law of Rani Katyayani. The doctor had said that the air in the garden quarters was purer than in Calcutta proper, and that it was possible that Sri Ramakrishna's disease in the throat would be cured or alleviated if he could live in place where he could breathe absolutely pure air. It was a few days after he had come to the garden that Dr. Rajendra Lal Datta came to see him and administered Lycopodium 200. After that, it appeared that there was a little alleviation of the disease. But since his coming there, the master had never got down from the first floor of the house to the ground floor or taken a walk in the garden. He felt much better that day and in the afternoon expressed a desire to have a walk. The devotees were therefore very happy on that day. Swami Vivekananda was feeling an intense detachment and had given up all desire for worldly prosperity. He was then he was then living in the company of Sri Ramakrishna in order to realize the Divine Lord and was practicing various spiritual exercises according to his instructions. He used to kindle a holy fire under a tree and pass nights in meditation, japa, reading, and other devotional scriptures. A few other devotees also, such as Junior Gopal, Kali, that is Abhedananda, and others, got the necessary articles for helping him in sadhana, and they themselves also practiced according to their capacity. The lay devotees could not always remain with the Sri Ramakrishna on account of their various worldly affairs, but whenever they had an opportunity, they came to see Sri Ramakrishna, made all arrangements about the food and other necessities for those who always remained busy in the service of Sri Ramakrishna and sometimes stayed there for a day or two. As it was the New Year's Day, the offices were closed and many devotees could come to the garden. It was 3 p.m., dressed in red bordered cloth, a shirt and a thick wrapper, also with red border, a cap covering the ears, and a pair of slippers. Sri Ramakrishna came down slowly from the first floor with Swami Adbhutananda Latu and entered the hall downstairs. He observed it closely and coming out of the western door, started for a walk in the garden. Some of the lay devotees saw him thus going for a walk and followed him with great joy. The young devotees like Narendra were then sleeping in the small room adjacent to the hall as they were fatigued on account of keeping vigil the previous night. They were doing spiritual practices the whole night. When he saw that the lay devotees were going with Master, Adbhutananda thought it unnecessary for him to go any further with him, so he returned on reaching the southern bank of the small pond in front of the hall. He took him he took with him another young devotee, and both of them busied themselves in sweeping and cleaning Sri Ramakrishna's room upstairs and in sunning his bedding and clothing. All the lay devotees, Girish Chandra Ghosh was then feeling the greatest attachment to God. At one time, the master highly praised his wonderful faith and said to the other devotees, Girish has more faith than 100% faith. People will hereafter be surprised to see his spiritual progress because of his faith. On account of the great surge of faith and devotion, Girish always looked upon Sri Ramakrishna as the Divine Lord Himself, incarnated through His grace to liberate souls from the bondage of the world. Although forbidden by Sri Ramakrishna, he expressed publicly this conviction of his to one and all. Girish was also present in the garden on that day and was sitting and conversing under a mango tree with Ram and a few other lay devotees. Surrounded by the devotees, the master was slowly proceeding by the broad path in the garden towards the gate and came to the middle of the path near the mango tree, where he saw Ramachandra Datta, Girish Chandra Ghosh sitting under the shade of the tree. He then addressed Girish and said, Girish, what have you seen in this which makes you say so many things publicly in glorification of this before one and all? Although Girish was so abruptly questioned, his faith remained unshaken. He hurriedly and with overflowing adoration he stood up, came to the path, knelt down at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna, and with folded hands said in choked voice, what more can I say about him, even a fraction of whose glory Vyasa and Valmiki miserably failed to express in their immortal epics and Puranas? Hearing Girish's word, charged with such wonderful faith, Sri Ramakrishna had horripilation all over the body. His mind ascended to a high plane and he was in Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Then seeing Sri Ramakrishna's face illumined with a divine halo, Girish cried out in great joy, Glory to Sri Ramakrishna, glory unto Ramakrishna, and took the dust of his feet again and again. Meanwhile, in a state of divine semi consciousness, the Master looked at all present and smilingly he uttered, Ramakrishna in that higher state, he uttered the blessing, what more shall I say? What more shall I say to you? May all of you be spiritually awakened. May all of you be spiritually awakened. When the devotees heard those words of blessings and protection from fear, they raised repeated cries of shouting, exclaiming, Glory to Sri Ramakrishna, glory to Sri Ramakrishna, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Jai Ramakrishna. Some of them saluted him, some showered flowers, some again came and touched his feet. No sooner had the first devotee touched his feet and stood up than Sri Ramakrishna, in that state of divine semi consciousness, touched the devotee chest and passing his hands in the upward direction said, Awake. As soon as the second person came and saluted him and stood up, he did the same thing to him, so also to the third and the fourth and so on. In this way, he touched one after another, all of those who approached him thus, and there arose by that marvelous touch a wonderful mood in mind of every devotee. Some of them began to laugh, some of them began to weep, some to meditate, and some again to call aloud all others in order that they might also get the same and be blessed by receiving the grace of Sri Ramakrishna. The sea of unconditioned mercy, and be sharers in the bliss of that was overflowing there. The noise and cries were so great that some of the devotees who afterwards became monks got up from their sleep, and others gave up the work they were engaged in. They came running and saw that all the devotees stood surrounding Sri Ramakrishna on the pathway in the garden, stood surrounding the master on the pathway in the garden, and were behaving like madmen. At once, they understood that Sri Ramakrishna was now in the same blessed divine mood under the influence of which he had blessed his special devotees at Dakshineshwar. He was now enacting that same divine play, the bestowal of his grace on a wider circle of people that had now gathered at his feet. Hardly had these devotees who were there, who were the monks in the making, come, then the state of Sri Ramakrishna changed and he was in the normal condition again. So now, this state of Kalpataru, Ramakrishna has assumed to bestow grace and mercy and give whatever they wanted in the spiritual kingdom. We came to know about that today. It is fast approaching January 1st. We are going to celebrate that January 1st. So we will be reliving. There will be a online program for that too. January 1st in the morning itself, we will be celebrating that somewhere between 8:30 to 10:30 or so. So we will again recollect, witness the same scene when Sri Ramakrishna became the bestower of mercy, bestower of his compassion, being a Kalpataru, giving everything to whatever the devotees wanted in the form of, there was one person who wanted money. Sri Ramakrishna gave him that too. He wanted to become rich. He became rich after that. Worldly things also were given. But that is not what we have to ask, that you can also get it through your earning or some business, but which cannot be got by us. The grace, the compassion, that is what we have to ask. We have to get from Sri Ramakrishna the higher spiritual property, the spiritual property, which is much, much more higher than what we can think. So we will be thinking of this aspect of Sri Ramakrishna when he became the Lord bestowing compassion, and move to the next class. So I think we'll be meeting again Thursday and Friday. That will be the two last meeting. After that, there will be a lull. There will be a gap or holiday. So until then, we will be going through the Great Master. I think you have we have sent the e-copy, e-book also to all of you. You can be reading that today, which I went through. It's very, very terse. The beginning of that, the question and answer session, explaining about that higher state between the Nirvikalpa, Samadhi, the Nirguna, the Saguna Brahma. We have to go through that again, understand every line, every bit of it. If possible, if God permits, we'll take up that little by little and go through that, because it's very, very important, very higher aspect. So I think when we were reading that, most of you will have not understood anything of it. Again and again we shall go through that and try to understand the higher aspect of that. Today, we will stop the discussion now. It's already time. Though you will be having a lot of questions and doubts, I think you may not ask anything. So it's the time for question. It's a time for clearing your doubts. If you have any question, if you have doubts, you can ask.
Maharaj.
Yes, Madhusudan.
What you said at the end is very true, Maharaj.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely it needs to be, we have to go through this over and over again and again. But
Yeah.
only one question is, so just thinking on this, we just stay at this physical plane. So we just it's a thought. It's just an idea, but it doesn't help us to move forward in just forgetting everything and just think about God. So we just think about this concept, these ideas, rather than just forgetting everything and just be yourself with your Lord.
Yeah.
How to balance these two?
See, when you have an inkling, a jhalak, it is called, a flash, then when you have that flash, you'll start getting interest in those higher things. So when we used to learn, I was learning pakwas, a instrument, just like mridangam in North India. They play that for Drupad Danga. It'll be very nice to hear. So we used to be practicing. Our sounds would be not so nice. We would not be playing that so beautifully. But to rouse interest, the teacher in pakwas used to play that pakwas for some time so beautifully. Then we get that inspiration, the chalak, that flash a little, then we will get so much of interest, then we will go on practicing. So every time we used to play a little and rouse our interest. Like that, this is Ramakrishna's and Sharda Nandaji Maharaj is giving a flash. So by which we get little inspiration so that we can continue, though it is very, very difficult to go up and get that state, but that can rouse your interest, make you feel that there is something higher. Just be drowning in this worldly life is not enough. We should also give our mind to that. So now and then we get this flash of light, a chalak. So we will it will inspire us to do more sadhana, be with our divine Lord, even to stay with the divine Lord, or at the lower state of devotion and other things, need some inspiration. So these thing now you can feel that, oh, it is very difficult for me to attain that. There is something very, very higher. Let me be satisfied with my own Lord, my Ishtadevata. Even that feeling, that inspiration came because you went through these higher things. That's all. So likewise, there's a flash, there's a jhalak by which you get little inspiration, and it will inspire you to continue in the spiritual life.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay, we shall now conclude with the prayer. ॐ प्रियतां पुण्डरीकाक्षः सर्वयज्ञेश्वरो हरिः तस्मिन् तुष्टे जगत्तुष्टं प्रीणिते प्रीणितं जगत् हरिः ॐ तत्सत् श्रीरामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste, Swamiji. Have a good day further.